The Leak Mound Interpretive Trail is sponsored by the Federal Highway Administration, the Georgia Department of Transportation, and the University of West Georgia.
Hi, and welcome to another Leak Mounds Interpretive Trail podcast. I'm Marcus Stopp.
And I'm Jennifer Teeter. If you're following along on the trail, this podcast corresponds to the Preserving the Past panel.
Today we're here at the Georgia Department of Transportation with archaeologists Pam Bachman and Terry Lottie.
So GDOT is required to comply with federal law, namely Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. Can you guys elaborate on that?
Well, GDOT, the Georgia Department of Transportation, actually receives money from the Federal Highway Administration, which is the federal partner for transportation here in the United States. And that is the main reason why we have to comply with Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, because we receive federal funding. We also receive federal permits in some cases, and that would also kick in Section 106, because it's mainly a federal law that federal entities have to comply with. But when state entities receive federal funding or permits, that's when they have to ultimately comply with it. So that's how we get involved. Also, in doing our projects, we have the specialty staff on staff to actually do the reviews that are necessary under Section 106. Because Section 106 specifies that you have to extend good faith and reasonable effort to identify, evaluate, and mitigate harm to historic properties which are eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. And so that is what kind of drives our job. We do the work of identifying properties, evaluating them for the National Register, and then encouraging avoidance first, minimization of harm second, and then ultimately mitigation if those other strategies aren't available to us for projects that the Department of Transportation would like to do.
So does Section 106 include all three phases then? Because were you...
Yes.
I mean, that's the whole process.
Yes, that's the whole process. You have to identify properties within your area that will be potentially affected. You have to evaluate them for their eligibility for the National Register. And then we're tasked with trying to avoid them, minimize harm to them, but then ultimately to mitigate if harm can't be avoided. And all through the process, actually, we have other things that are required. One of them is consultation, both with interested parties, but more notably with federally recognized Indian tribes that claim ancestry or area within the state of Georgia. And so that's part of the process, too, is consultation.
I think it's important to note, too, Section 106 is what makes us not feel like our jobs are a conflict of interest. Preservationist archaeologists working for, a road building company, basically. It's because as professionals and colleagues, we would do the right thing anyway, but we are literally responsible to and for doing the right thing through Section 106. Because it's very important to remember that the state of Georgia paves 55 acres a year, and that's not roads. That's big box stores, large housing developments, and because they're private companies, they're not responsible for taking into account the resources that are around them. So a lot of these things get lost. But it's because of road projects, urban sprawl, that you have Section 106, and it's because of Section 106 that we are doing a good job, I think, at recognizing resources, historic resources, and protecting them, or at least studying them for their data.
That's right. That's a good point, Terry, because private developers aren't subject to this law. And so agency like the Georgia DOT is. And that means that there's a lot of preservation going on of sites that may have been destroyed by other entities. By the DOT itself. They're doing the responsible thing. They are being environmentally regulated in doing these projects. So we're actually getting sites to investigate. We're helping the cause of archaeology in a pretty interesting, unique way by doing this work. These are sites that may not have been identified, they may not have been evaluated, and they certainly wouldn't have been protected or investigated, however the project turns out, without the impetus of the project in the first place. So what some people do see as a conflict of interest, archaeologists working for essentially a construction company, we see as an opportunity.
Which is, and being on the leak site is the best background for this, because you can see the patchwork of how this site has actually been understood, studied, or destroyed because of different developments,
Mm-hmm.
not literally developments, but sometimes literally developments, and how our own profession has changed, how our own laws have changed. Before Section 106, you were carte blanche doing what you needed to do.
Mountains were used as road fill,
right?
And things were destroyed without environmental laws. Who knows how much we lost at leak when people just put roads wherever they wanted to and used things on the landscape however they wanted to. There was, at that time, no sense of public responsibility for those types of things. And so 106 does the job of making the country realize that we have certain historic things that we all have a public responsibility for, and money that is given to the DOT by the public is put back into the public by us being responsible for public resources. And that's kind of how we think of it.
Yeah, it is very much that. We very much are interested in making sure that people who come through the state of Georgia are on very safe roads. None of us will deny that. But we have been afforded the opportunity through GDOT to also make sure that we provide public with a better understanding of their history. And that we have double duty, if you will, as archaeologists within the department, because we're part of that team that helps you get from point A to point B in a way that's not going to be harmful to you and hopefully pleasant, but we're also responsible for helping a tribe in Oklahoma understand their origin, helping a kid growing up in Georgia to know that Indians weren't eradicated. I've had that question asked of me before. What Indians are you talking to? Because there aren't anymore. So we have a heavy responsibility, and Section 106 helps us make sure that we're accountable and we're doing the right thing.
Accountable is a good word, because there wasn't accountability before, there wasn't responsibility before the environmental laws of the 60s and the 70s, and so I think that's a good development, and we're reaping the benefits of that. And Terry's right, you can see that very well at the leak site, because you see the destruction that occurred prior to the environmental laws, you see some destruction that occurred based on private developments that aren't subject to these laws, and then you see the law in action in the survey work, the testing work, and mitigation work that was done in advance of the road widening. And then ultimately you see even consultation and you see preservation there. It's quite the range of experiences in relation to the leak site.
It's a microcosm of everything that's gone wrong and everything that's going quite well, I think. How we all grew up understanding things. Because, the law is not even short-sighted to the point that, it wanted to only preserve things that we knew were monumental. Because I think that was the first response was, by urban sprawl, you are destroying things that we know are important. It's not so short-sighted in that anymore, because now we are helping to preserve and understand things we didn't even know were there, which is important.
And Section 106 is kind of the guiding force behind your efforts to preserve.
And it also helps people to understand our collective past.
Thanks for listening to another Leak Mounds Interpretive Trail podcast.
The Leak Mounds Interpretive Trail project was done in partnership with the City of Cartersville and Bartow County. Music by Tommy Wildcat.